And he describes this land when he first saw it as the fertile land where coconuts and ava grow. So ava was here. Then there's other stories that talk about how ava was brought to Hawaii. Both of them, there's two that mention Oeli Kuka Heana, I believe is how it's said. And one of them, it's brought to Maui, the other one it's brought to Hawaii and discarded as a rubbish plant, and then a female picks it up and takes care of it and nurtures it and kind of discovers its usefulness. And then in other stories, it's brought by birds and planted in Puna, or Kane and Kanaloa are also associated with it arriving here, and rats taking pieces and planting it down here on the land. So there's all kinds of stories of how it originates. I just want to recognize, forgot I gotta press this one too. These three women, because a lot of their research helped my research, and being a lady, I like to recognize the ladies. Plus, a lot of times in our history and stuff, research was done by men, and they emphasized the male role and not so much the women's role. So just want to give a shout out to these ladies for doing research that allowed me to do my research. Yeah, so kind of what is Ava? I've been talking a lot about Ava. It has several other names, most widely known as Kava. It's also known as Yongona. In Hawaii, we have 13 Hawaiian varieties. So these are varieties, like, it's not from a stem, it's from a cutting that you take it. So these are varieties, you know, scientifically speaking, not necessarily according to the mo'olelo I might have just mentioned, but it was, you know, selected for as the settlers settled the Pacific, and so we're one of the last places to be settled. So they were selected out for that. So I like to think of our Hawaiian Ava as the best, just by selection, you know. And it is known to have the highest levels of the cavalactones, which is the active medicinal ingredient, or whatever you want to call it. So you can basically cultivate it in three methods. You can either take like a shoot off the bottom. That's our little chalk drawing of the ava plant there, but you can take like a shoot off the bottom, like a whole kind of part of the plant with the roots and the stem and everything, and I'll plant that. You can take a stem and plant from the nodes where we have the maka there, kind of in the middle, that would be pointed up. That's where the plant would sprout from. Or you can take a branch and lay it down and allow the nodes to touch the ground, and then roots will sprout off of that, and you can cut it off and transplant it, or cut it off and leave it there, you know, depending how close it is to the other plant, what kind of spacing you want, and all of that kind of stuff. For me, I take nodes and I'll put them in cinder soil mixture and just put them in a shady place, make sure they stay moist but not wet. Or I'll throw them under a tree that produces a lot of leaf litter and is always shady, and they'll sprout up. And then when they're about yay tall, not counting the pot, then you can either transplant into a bigger pot or put into ground that you've prepared, but you want to make sure that it's got well drainage and lots of shade. My plants that I put in the ground, I kind of wait till they're bigger so that I don't necessarily need full day shade, but only half day shade. But yeah, so you have to pay attention to where you're going to plant and make sure that you have those appropriate conditions for your plants. Yeah, and then so when you harvest the plant, it's the roots that are consumed and used for the drink. So you don't have to take up the whole plant, but you'll want to get the roots. So when we harvest, we'll you know, you can cut off the portion of the plant and then kind of like excavate with the o'o bar all of the dirt. You want to make sure you're going out far enough and deep enough that you're not chopping off roots, but you know, if you leave some behind, it's okay. It's okay. But it is the roots and the pu'ava, or like what would be kind of the corm, that is then processed down. Traditionally, it was chewed in the mouth. They liked women with very nice teeth, or children with strong jaws. But it would be chewed to like a pulp, and then you mix it with water and strain it, and that's the drink that's produced. Some people do cook it. Other people will leave it like to soak overnight and then strain it. So I say play with it if you're open to that. You know, see what you like. I'm sure the different we know the different varieties have different effects, but they affect different people differently. So play with the varieties, play with preparation, you know, see what you like. It's a very personal thing, you know. You gotta pay attention to your yard, pay attention to your plant, pay attention to the effects, all of that kind of stuff. And then it was used traditionally, ceremonially, mostly, and as a medicine. The ali'i would drink it socially, and commoners would drink it for relaxation, like pauhana, you know, just to relax, kind of recuperate. It is kind of a muscle relaxer. It also helps with social anxiety. I like to use it for just being present and self-reflection. So it's, for those who want to know, spinal rather than cerebral depressant. And so it steadies the pulse, but doesn't raise the temperature, and acts as a stomach tonic. Stomach tonic, sorry. Yeah. So it was a drink of the gods, and it was associated with Mauliola, which is like the god of like health, or goddess, I guess. It's also the home of Pele at the Kilauea crater. And the Kanako Iwi understood it to assist in gaining insight and facilitate in delegation. So that's like the self-reflection and the social anxiety stuff. So when they would have like important discussions or controversial topics to discuss, they would open with like an ava ceremony to set that kind of mood and allow for that discussion to happen without, you know, with minimal hostility. So in regards to consumption, we've talked some of that. There is an olelo no'eau that says Ke'uhu mai ne koluna, which it states those above are descending. So this is kind of like speaking to that clarity and that self-reflection and being able to delegate, because now you can see more clearly the bigger picture versus that the emotions that may cause that hostility within you. Yeah, I think that's enough of that for now. You guys will have time for questions. So I mentioned Kane and Kanaloa. This is oli that is specific to Ava. It was collected from Solomon, Lehua Nui, Kalani, Mai, Helu, Pelea Holani. And it was stored up in the Bishop Museum archives. But the Mele describes the deities Kane and Kanaloa, who are closely associated with the Ava. And then it also mentions Pele, who is associated with Puna and the Ava of Keahialaka, which is down here in Puna next to Poho'iki. So now all of this is kind of coming into Puna and Ava. But this oli here is for Kane Ika Vaiola, which is Kane of the Living Water, which is kind of where I got the title for my presentation here. So the fresh water, which we're associated as Puna and all of our abundance in it, is the manifestation of Kane. And so when preparing the Ava, that's what you needed was the fresh water. So that's why Kane is summoned during Ava ceremonies and things. And so in the earliest stories of Hawaii, Hawaii is connected with Ava through Kane and Kaneloa, with them on their floating cloud where they were drinking Ava. So we'll now talk about Puna. You guys are all familiar with that. We're down here in Puna. This is a shot I took up on Pu'u He Hulu Hulu, which is in the Valkeleo Puna Forest Reserve, and it's overlooking all of this beautiful corner down there. You can kind of see Pu'u Kali'u is down there. Pu'u Kali'u is a pu'u that is known, well, Kali'u is known for its ava, its potent ava, and it's mentioned in the stories of Hi'iaka i Kopolio Pele when she comes down from Kilauea because her sister sends her to Kauai to go fetch her lover Lohiao, and she travels all through Lower Puna and past Kali'u. So here I have an excerpt from our Olelo No'iau from Mary Pukui that talks about the yellow ava of Kali'u, and while she credits that to ava on Kauai, in the story of Hi'iaka, she goes to Kauai and she magically has her ava from Puna appear when she gets Lohiao or whatever, you know, that night when they're dying. And so I like to think that maybe that's the ava from Kali'u and Kauai, but you know, all of these islands have, I'm biased towards Puna, but and all of these islands, they do have, they do have, you know, a lot of the names are the same from island to island, and even from Ahupua'a to Ahupua'a, but that's just my little take on it. And then we have down here in the yellow is an excerpt from the actual book where while she's traversing Puna, going down to the ocean, she's with her companion, Wahine o Ma'o, and she chants this chant to reveal Lehuakea and Lahua'ula, who are posing as men but aren't really men, they're like birds or whatever, you know, and it mentions the ava of Kali'u and whatever. And this I associate with the birds planting the ava. So we do have famous ava here. Oh, and this is Pu'u Kali'u, if you're wondering what that is. But we do have famous ava here in Puna that's planted by the birds in the pouches of the trees. I haven't found any yet, and I haven't successfully propagated any in that manner, but there are stories about it. So Puna was known for its ava, its abundance in ava, because of our forests with those shady canopies and the young lava flows with lots of drainage. It was a prime location for them. And this continued on even after we had Europeans arrive. So when they first arrived, they kind of didn't look at it good because of its association with the gods and that conversion to Christianity. So Queen Kahahumanu actually declared that the planting of ava was prohibited, and neither the chiefs nor the commoners were allowed to drink it. And then in 1868, they changed it so that you could freely consume ava again. And this Haole man, Robert Rycroft, saw the opportunity. He bought the whole Ahupua'a of Pohuigi for less than $400. And he moved to the island of Hawaii in 1877 with the purpose of cultivating ava and going into ava business. In 1882, he actually starts advertising his ava for sale, and it's being shipped over to Oahu. A lot of it is going to Germany. Yeah. So and then you have here the Western druggist that is talking about this beautiful new drug, and it's ava. And so I like to think of kind of our ava here in Puna as being the catalyst for this new international phenomenon. You know, you can find ava bars all over the place now, which is even more why I felt that this work was important, because it's more than just this kind of alcoholic beverage, which it is oftentimes compared to. But yeah, so despite the endeavor of trying to do rubber here, and they did lumber, took out a lot of our ohia. Here there was koa as well that they took out with the Hawaiian Mahogany Company. We had sugar cane. Ava was right there with them, bringing in tons and tons of income for some people, including the natives. So here we have just a couple of excerpts from old newspapers. We have the field sheet for a TMK up in Kaule. Anyways, up by the Cinder Road highway. That Ahupua'a, we've got the Ava factory site. Right below that, we've got a testimony about the several hundred acres of ava planted, and then more being planted with, and then even further down is a continuation of that. They're basically people at Opihikau, the natives, have ava, and they've got tons and tons of ava on acres and acres of ava, and they want that Opihikau road built so that they have a way to transport their ava, so that they can actually, capitalize on it as well. So I went out and I wanted to do environmental survey kind of things to see what wild ava was doing, and I went and talked to people to see what people were doing, and I wanted to look at that and see how they overlap, and then kind of what were the best practices according to what people were doing as well as what the ava liked. So to gain insight as to what the plants, that's what this is talking about, the voice of the forest, what they like, we went out and we did environmental surveys. So we went out and we took a bunch of data on a bunch of plants, the ava plants, as well as their species surrounding them within a 3-meter diameter plot. And then the plants that were determined healthy enough to take cuttings from, we took cuttings for propagation, as well as to further identify their variety and all of that stuff. So from those surveys, we were shooting for 20, because it's that's the base number of individuals you want to survey, so you can actually say something about a larger group. Unfortunately, we weren't able to locate one, so we only surveyed 19 individuals. We had GPSs for 8 individuals, and then the rest were kind of word of mouth. Just go out in the forest and look for them with people that had seen them out and about. The surveys were on mostly sunny days with some clouds. The canopy was fairly dense with 81 to 99 plus percentile, just closed canopy, nice and dark. They liked it. The substrates the plants were growing on really varied. There was most of them were on Others were on moss, directly like nursery kind of log moss action. And then there was one that Kamehameha Schools had brought in cinder and was kind of like babying. That was the one you saw with us taking propagations from, because it had so much love. It was nice and big, had lots of stems to give us. So there were 39 accompanying species in those 3-meter plots with the 19 plants. The one with the most occurrences was the wild yam. The second most was actually the native ikahakaha fern, or the bird's nest fern. And third was the invasive Cecropia, or trumpet tree plant. And those had quite an effect on the ava. So you can see the native canopy over here, nice hapu'u and everything, protecting the ava from the Cecropia leaves and whatnot falling on them behind it. The opposite side, you can see like the invasive fern, the vines, and all of the damage on the ava leaves from the Cecropia leaves and pollen that falls down. So just one of my personal observances. It likes the native plants. They get along well together. And then moving on to the human aspect, voices of the people. We did community survey first to gain a nice broad perspective, looking at just, it was open to everybody via Google Forms. The link was shared on social media. It was open for 2 weeks. We did have a section in it that like asked where they were from, where they grew up, that kind of thing, so that we could, figure out who was from Puna and who wasn't, kind of thing. I also did consultation. This was place-based in Puna for the most part. I looked at a TMK numbers, TMK map that was surrounding the Kali'u area, and contacted names that were familiar to me, and then they gave me who I should go talk to. There were a couple of people like on the survey. I asked if people were open to being interviewed, and so a couple of them were from the survey as well. But this was able to give us a look at individuals with all kinds of experience and whatnot, to gain that broad perspective again. And then I did mentorship myself. In archaeology, we call it participant observation. So, but this gave me personal experience to allow me to feel like I was able to add to the discussion. I had several forms of mentorship, from working on a commercial farm which supplied their commercial establishment on Ali'i Drive in Kailua Kona, to I had 2 practitioners. One is a mahi'ai or mahi'ava practitioner, farmer, and the other is a hula practitioner. And this gave me a nice big window of not just one point of view, but many perspectives of Ava. So real quick, kind of boring stuff, but since I mentioned it, I'll give you the results. We had 37 respondents in that 2-week period of time, which I understand is fairly good. 29 of which were actually from Puna, so that was a higher percentage than I expected. Kinda, I don't know, I'm still iffy about that because I'm from Puna, so most of the people were from Puna that I shared it with. But anyways, and so of the 29 people who lived in Puna, 27 of them were females. Women tend to participate a lot more, I'm noticing. 2 were males. But only 21 of those individuals were currently living in Puna. So some of them were people who had moved out of Puna but had gotten their hands on them. The lengths of residency in Puna varied from 0 to 47 years, so pretty big gap there. And this is just kind of a glimpse at how they rated their knowledge of Ava for themselves. So everybody was at least a little bit aware of what Ava was, but as you can see, for the most part, nobody's really wanting to claim expertise. this was engagement, so not knowledge of Ava, but how they engage with Ava, how often they engage with Ava, you know, and then where they're getting it from. So obviously, if you're growing yourself or gathering from the forest, it's a little bit more engaged, in depth, than if you're just going to the store or you had a friend who gifted it to you. And then this one I really like, just because it's kind of creative, but it gives you a real nice snapshot of what they think of Ava versus what good Ava is. And I was really surprised that while they both mention it's earthy, nobody mentioned like good Ava tastes good. It's not a component there, you know, but good Ava is better medicine if you're looking at this, and Ava is just relaxing in general. So I like those. I think they're cool. And then this is the one I talked about. So there's a pretty even amount of interest across these categories here. For the most part, it's all the same individuals. 14 of them are females. The remainder are the males. But hey, kudos to him. Or hims. So consultation outcome. I had 5 narrators, 3 of which were actual cultivators. 2 of those were practitioners. And then we have 2 community members from that survey. This is just a glimpse at the map that I used to look for names to contact to begin consultation, with the big star over there indicating where Pu'ukali'u is. And these are my beautiful narrators who were willing to sit down and talk Ava with me. Some of them much longer than others, but they all had great mana'o. So in the center here is one of my mentors, Lealoha. She was born and raised here in Lower Puna, or what she calls Deep Puna. She's a hula practitioner, Ava cultivator, and a cultural educator. Over here in your top left is Pae Āina. He's also a cultural practitioner of a mahi'ai, or farmer, and an Ava cultivator. He now lives in Kohala, but learned from Uncle Jerry Konanui, and did most of his trials with Ava in Ola'a, Upper Puna. He is also highly recommended by Uncle Jerry's daughter Nikki and his brother Howard. The third cultivator is down here. This is Greg Owen. He's a longtime resident of Wawa. He also worked at the national park for some decades and has quite a bit of experience with Ava through those events and whatnot. And then the 2 on the right there are our survey respondents. The top is Kendra. She was raised in Nanavale here in Lower Puna. She graduated from Pohoa High School. And then the last narrator is Angelique Thompson. She's actually born and raised in Hilo with family from Hilo, and has recently moved to Puna with minimal engagement with Ava in the past, just a couple of times, like at the Ava bar in Hilo, and then she did come out with me one time to the farm to harvest and process as well. So that was fun. But from their talks, these 3 themes here continuously emerged in their conversations. Education, healing, and sacredness. Of all of these, the most prominent between the 5 was education by far. Then healing and sacredness was kind of last, but they still all talked about it. So the 3 cultivators all recognize the importance of not only sharing with others what has and has not worked for them as far as cultivating Ava and whatnot, but also stress the importance of experimenting and being open to a variety of methods, so we can all learn. The individuals who are not cultivators or cultural practitioners make claims for the need for to incorporate culture in education. All of the narrators agree that incorporating culture such as Ava and its associated practices is empowering to the youth and sets them up for success. Several of the narrators mention that simply introducing and teaching the youth about Ava creates a foundation for them to fall back on in the future. This foundation is the connection created with the land and people that leads to the healing spoken of by the narrators. In theme number 2, so healing, it's a long time been known as a medicine. Pae Āina and Greg both credit it to them being cured of alcoholism. Angel states that she prefers it to alcohol because it does not control her like alcohol. And then those who consume it regularly talk about the ability to heal through creating an awareness from enlightenment, like I talked about earlier. And then Lei specifically mentions that seeing her Ava plants doing well reminds her that she is doing something right, and it is reassuring to her when facing challenging times. I just want to add to that I mentioned this is community-based participatory research, and that part really hit home for me because my field work started like 2 weeks after we locked down for the pandemic. And so to get community and participatory and all of that in the time of the pandemic was really stressful and frustrating, and had it not been for the plants that Anna gave me, one of my mentors, just being there and being able to talk to it and see it still growing and continue to thrive and everything. And it's like, okay, this is why we're doing this. Like, we're going to do the best that we can for you and for the community, even if it's not how I had envisioned it. So that plant was reassurance for me as well. And then sacredness is the final theme that emerged. All narrators kind of spoke about protocols and ceremonies associated with Ava, those with minimal engagement, myself included prior to this, were afraid to engage, so to speak, because of its sacredness. And that again circled around to the need for education around these kinds of things so that people can engage without that fear and understand that yes, it's sacred, but that doesn't mean it's taboo, or untouchable for us. Things that are sacred because we made them sacred, so there's a reason for it, but doesn't mean that it's off the table forever. Yeah, I don't like reading and I don't have all of that memorized, so I'm just going to say that's enough of that. My mentorship experience, like I mentioned, I had numerous. They were cultural, commercial, as well as personal, and it was just a really awesome experience. I've got quite an Ava patch going now. I'm blessed to be able to share with people like you folks today. I get to share plants, like at the end of this, there's my contact information. If you want plants, I make way more cuttings than I can handle. So, but I get to have connection to culture. I get to go out and present. I was at Mary Monard vending and sharing with people and teaching them about Ava and being relief for those who were there working and performing hard all day and all night and all of that. So that was really nice. If you're wondering, these are mud hens, we call them, or alai'ula. They are in the story, they had fire. Maui wanted it, and they kept hiding it from him. And eventually he got it from them, and things went down, and they got scorched, and that's why the red's on their face. But we like to call ourselves, the ladies, the Avahine mud hens. Before I knew the story and earlier in my journey, I thought, okay, cool, we're always in the mud, like with the o'o bars scratching, in the roots, like hens. So mud hens, okay. But now for me, it's more like we hold that fire, that and we're here to pass that along and ignite things in other people so they can shine bright, be themselves, all of that stuff. But yeah, it's been really amazing. I still don't think I'm a cultural practitioner, but I definitely feel much more cultural and confident in who I am. I'm sorry? Yes. I would have answered it, but yeah, we're gonna do questions after. So what does this all mean? How is this growing resilience? Why is it pertinent to today? Ava is a relationship builder. It helps to build relationship between people, between places, between the Aina, between the plants. You're going to want to learn. I'm not going to tell you unless you ask me, and I may not know right offhand. But, you're going to learn which plants the Avas get along better with, which ones their roots are in a mess with, and which ones aren't. So it's this great relationship building connector, and then it is integral to Hawaiian culture. Like, I know it's used fishing, farming, hula, medicine, like all of these things incorporate Ava, so it's connecting all of those things. And so that's why it's important today. We are so disconnected due to social media and just like the rat race thing, going to work, dropping off kids, picking up like all of that craziness. In conclusion, how does Ava help to grow our resilience in Puna? Community, relationship building. You have more support, you're paying attention, you're more conscious of things, you want to do well for the plants, for the Aina, for your community that's watching you. You might not want to stick that finger out the window in that moment of road rage anymore, like it just helps us to become better peoples, and in becoming better peoples, we like better things, we take better care, and those relationships and connections become love for each other, love for the Aina, love for the plants, and that's where the resilience is going to come from, because we can't all do it alone. But when you have that love and that connection and those supports, we help carry each other through, and that is true resilience. And Ava helps me see alignments too. So it called to me, and it made sure I stayed on track. And that's, you find what calls to you. You follow those weird little signs, and you'll be resilient, because that's where you're supposed to be. That's what you're supposed to be doing, But I can go on, and I don't mind going on and on. But I'm going to say that officially ends my talk for today. And now it's open for questions, discussions, whatever kinds of things. Mahalo, guys, for listening. Mahalo.
I had a question about on the top of your head, companion plants.
I'm sorry?
Companion plants, like plants that do work well with the Ava.
Yeah, so for the most part, you don't want plants next to the Ava that are, like, you don't want them too close, because their roots are going to intertwine. But you also, like, plants that have these really far-reaching roots aren't that great. So I've been advised to stay away from coconut, ulu, and ohia specifically, planting them close by those things. I had to work towards, jogging my memory. What were the plants?
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Last week, Auntie Anna was talking about kalo and the different varieties of kalo and the genetic modification that's been happening with kalo, and how there's like a fight to pass bills to not modify kalo in any way. And I'm wondering if the same pertains for the Ava plant, and if there's any like types of genetic modifications that are going on with varieties of the kava plant.
I don't know of any types of like genetic modifications that are going on right now, or concerns about that, but I do know like we are concerned about people who are growing like Isa or the Samoan or Fijian varieties here in Hawaii, and then selling them as Hawaiian Ava because they're grown here in Hawaii.
Right.
So that is a concern, but I haven't heard anything as far as GMO goes yet.
Okay.
Yet.
Okay. That's good.
So we're trying to,
This is
like,
good.
you know, get it out there now that it is a sacred plant, and, you know, there are appropriate ways to engage with it. And I think that's understood about kalo, but maybe too late, you know, but I'm just like, maybe we can get it out there before it's too late for Ava.
Well, I'm happy to hear.
I might have missed this, but how much of the kava that's done here is for export versus local consumption? What kind of feedback do you have?
From what I know right now, like, fresh Ava isn't being exported from here.
In powder form?
The powder form, most of the powder form going around is Vanuatu or Fijian, so I don't know what they're doing with their Ava other than maybe selling it to the local establishments for consumption.
I just wanted to speak from my own experience. So I visited Fiji about 35 years ago as a culture anthropologist, and we had to bring dried kava to every village we went to, and it was a bag for the chief or the community. That was a sign of respect. I'm kind of curious if there's any cultural practices they have here. And I also wanted to speak to the community building aspect, because every place I went, you did kava at night with 5 to 10 people sat around the kava bowl, sat together, sang together, danced together every night. Everybody went to sleep around the same time, partly because the kava was making everyone tired, so it helped with actually the physical co-regulation of the community. That was very interesting. So I don't know how much that plays into it. Also, everybody slept way better because they were sleeping in berets on top of pigs and animals. It made noise. And also 6 people to a beret, which is, you know, if you don't have the kava, you ain't sleeping.
As far as, like, you must bring Ava when you visit here in Hawaii, I mean, they'll definitely appreciate it if you bring it. But because of the legislation and the association with the deities and the Christianity and everything, it kind of went underground. And so there isn't a real understanding, like, you must bring or anything.
Maybe it's still a sign of respect.
Yeah, it would definitely be a sign of respect. There is, like, bring ho'opuku with a gift. So, like, with all of my consultants and things, I brought, like, cookie or dried fish or something just to mahalo them for their time and energy and sharing their ike with me, you know, but it doesn't specifically have to be Ava. Yeah.
Okay, and then the second thing I wanted to talk about was the relationship to Germany and kava. Very interesting to me because it's currently actually illegal in Germany and a few European countries because of, in my opinion, the interaction with alcohol that they're not really talking about. They're just saying this is bad for your liver.
Yeah.
But it's not bad for your liver. It's only bad for your liver if it's interacting with alcohol. But if you have a culture that has alcohol and they don't understand that, then it is going to be bad for your liver. But it's not on its own.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious about that, the legality aspect of kava in certain countries and what your thoughts are about that.
I think education, they need, like, to be educated. I do, in my report, I do talk about, like, the early Europeans and their perspectives of Ava and comparing it to alcohol and all of that. And just in my personal experience, that comes from ignorance, not actually engaging with it and personally experiencing it, you know.
I just wanted to touch on that. I mean, a lot of times illegality has a direct correlation with, corporate greed, you know, and the connections, and, how lobbyists will often get paid to make something outlawed, to make it illegal. And that happens a lot with plant medicines in general. And,
I mean, I talk about that all the time. You know, I don't like Western medicine. Why would you go to somebody who makes a living off of sick people to get well? You know, and then the pharmacies are synthesizing all of these natural medicines and illegal, you know, to making all the legal stuff illegal.
creates how to put the muscles don't spasm or undergo contractions. So I wanted to support that for anybody who breaks anything here too.
Awesome, yeah. I did read Must We Wait in Despair. It was a report from 1867. They interviewed 24 kahuna la'au lapa'aus on Maui, but they wanted a record. They're trying to license kahuna la'au lapa'aus, and they wanted a record of what they were doing and how they were doing it and all of that. And in that, there were tons of treatments that ava was used for, various, from stems, leaves, roots, like all kinds of things, and they would drink it, make salves, whatnot. So it's got a wide range beyond just like relaxation and whatnot. And that's why I really emphasize experimenting for yourself, not just with ava, but with the different varieties and the different preparations and propagations. And even one of the treatments included abstaining from ava altogether.
Oh.
We give you one other one. It also helps with respiratory stuff and drying mucus. If you're on an airplane, for example, or producing mucus, that also.
Or if you're hacking a lung out like me all day.
I'm done now. I'm complete. Thank you. I just wanted to...
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm very nervous up here, so anything you folks have to add is much appreciated.
All for your time, and you're doing great. I'm really enjoying the. I wasn't sure. I was like, what is this? Oh yeah, I'll show. I'll check it out, and I'm really happy I did.
Yes.
I've heard at least like some of the plants that are growing on the property that we steward. Some folks have said that maybe what we have growing is more false ava than regular ava, and so I was just wondering if you could speak to kind of like how maybe there's like different varieties that are prevalent that are kind of more of this like false ava variety, or any markers to maybe help tell the difference between what's like a genuine ava variety.
I don't know what the differences are. Like, I can't be like, oh, the false one's gonna look like this. But the Hawaiian Ava Association put out a really nice reference. It's online. It's in 2 parts. It's just like the Ava book or something. And I just Google it and it pops up. But
Can you repeat that?
the Hawaiian Ava Association with Ed Johnson and Jerry Konanui, couple of other guys did the Ava book, and it's online in 2 parts. But I would just go in there and, like, if you don't have a real plant, I mean, even if you have a real plant, like in there they break down the all 13 varieties and what their distinctive characters are. And so, like, familiarizing yourself with that, and if you've got actual plants, even better, go compare and look and see what it looks like in real life. And then just looking at that and being like, that's not one of them. Like, that would be, because that's how I've had to do it in the past. Like, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. What is this? So that would, I'm sorry, I don't have an easy answer.
That's a general plant problem. Our plant identification, it's not easy in general.
Yeah. And the, like, apps, they're always wrong.
Yeah.
Don't use them.
How about preparation? How do you prepare them?
So we prepare it now. We'll harvest a whole plant, and then we will take it and shake off as much dirt as we can, cut off all the stems. Traditionally, we leave 1 stem, but we'll cut off all the stems down to the corm, and then we'll get a wood block and an axe, hack it up into manageable pieces where we can get in the cracks and crevices, and then lots of water hose washing. Pressure washer has been tried. It doesn't work so great because it actually, like, takes chunks of the roots and stuff away. But pressure washing till there's no dirt. all clean, 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 clean. And then we take knives and we chop it to about 1-inch size. And then we put it in the food processor. And we get it down to a pulp. And then it's about a day. You can leave it like that, otherwise you freeze it. Once you mix it with water, it starts to ferment. So I have had stuff in my fridge for a month that you can taste it, but I'm like, hey, it's kombucha ava. But the suggested time is 4 days to a week if you prepare it.
A month or more. I heard 1 month or longer to get the hard. What was it? The hard ava.
The ava kombucha.
Ava kombucha.
But the plant does need to grow for at least 2.5 years. That would be really young. After about 4 years, you start to get a lot of nematodes and root rot and stuff. So you want to harvest between 2.5 and 4 years.
Is there anything to prevent the nematodes and
Picking good stock, keeping, like I said, preparing the space before you plant them, and just having that healthy soil.
Is it the age that you harvest it? Does it or have to do with just like harvesting an animal, for instance? Where you want it kind of young, right? You don't want it to be an old, mature rooster, right? You'd rather have the juvenile rooster, right?
Well, like I mentioned, you can just harvest a portion of it, and so there were huge plants in the ground for decades previously, and they would just take what they needed, or the ones growing in the trees, they would just cut the hanging roots and leave them there. But with the introduction of exotic species, let's say, now we've got things, and so it doesn't really start to develop its cavalactones until about 2.5 years. But like I said, after about 4, maybe you can push it to 5 years, then you're gonna have a lot of no good stuff.
Potentially, right?
Yeah.
But if you could wait a decade.
Yeah.
If it's,
I mean, I've got a plant that I leave in the ground just because he's the first one I put in the ground, and I'm just gonna keep him pretty and let him live forever. I'm gonna take cuttings off of him,
I was wondering, you mentioned the difference between sacred and taboo, and I was wondering if you can say which one kapu best describes? Do you refer to Ava as kapu, as holy?
Yeah, but I a lot of generally taboo, kapu, and sacred are kind of interchangeable. For me, I just understand taboo is something naughty that you don't do. Sacred is something you hold in reverence. For me, kapu is restrictions.
Okay.
So it does have its restrictions, and you do want to release those before you enjoy Ava socially. You don't want to just go from ceremony and then go party with your Ava. You're going to want to have that process to close out the ceremony and free the Ava of its sacredness, kind of thing. I mean, it's going to still be sacred. I still drink with reverence, but free it of its kapu, I guess you would.
Okay. Thank you.
On that same topic, just when you shared it, first time around, it had me thinking about shame versus humility, right? And when we're not supposed to do something, when you do it, you should feel ashamed, healthy shame, right? But humility is treating it with respect, so approaching cautiously, knowing the right intention for it, and it's a very different sort of emotion to feel.
Yeah.
Just wanted to share that.
You mentioned the whole harvesting thing up to the point of squeezing it fresh. I'm curious what happens when you buy it and what the difference would be, because most places I can use it as a powder.
So I'm not very familiar with the drying process. You would want to get it extremely fine. And then it's the same thing. I mean, squeezing and straining it in water. I don't like the taste of powdered stuff. It definitely has a different taste and, for me, a different texture. So, yeah, I don't engage with it.
I describe that as a cross between mud and cocaine.
It's got the grit. Yeah, and for me, like, fresh ava is very earthy. I'm like, it's a plant's black coffee. You know? That's how I would describe it. And it doesn't have that grit. Yes, Joseph.
You said in the 1800s a lot of ava was imported to Germany. That must have taken a long time. You know how it was like imported as a root, or
So the articles I read, it would be the whole root dried.
the whole root.
So maybe they dry the whole root before grinding, you know, and then I did one time, but it wasn't dried, but fresh, grind with a mortar and piston kind of thing. And that took forever, but, you know, if it was dried, it probably would have been faster. But yeah, it was probably dried roots because they would take bundles of dried roots even to like the farmers markets and things.
They didn't have food processors back then.
They didn't have food processors, and they have stories of little tidbits about people. You couldn't leave the farmers market without seeing, like, everybody was chewing on a root, and they had their bundle on their back, and you know, they didn't necessarily need to strain it. Even today, working hard, you get sore, pop a root, continue harvesting.
A little dirt's good for you too. No need pressure wash.
When we're talking about plant medicine and we think about, like, for a variety of plant medicines, and we think about, like, dosages, and I know you said certain types of kava have certain type of effects, and even those effects vary depending on certain people, but, like, overall, when we're talking about, like, dosages and, like, the amount that we consume and with what intention behind it, whether it's, like, ceremonial, when I've done it on the rare occasions, it's usually only been, like, 1 cup, and, like, that's already a lot. And I think, like, when I hear about people doing it recreationally, I'm wondering if they're, like chugging it back, and I'm just, like, thinking about, like, I wouldn't know what the, like, higher effects of it at, like, higher doses are.
Lots
And
of
how that
urination.
pertains. Lots of what?
Urination.
The psychological effects that it has on you at those doses, and if that's still considered a spiritual practice to, like, have it in abundance and, like, get super, or, like,
Rooted.
what if that looks like, yeah, right?
You have feedback?
I do.
We're happy to hear it.
So when I was in the village of Lavena, Fiji for about 2 months. Every night the people did kava over ceremony for about 2 hours. Every person had 10 cups.
Wow.
Yeah.
In 2 hours, wow.
They made it a little longer, but I'm saying they all
Yeah.
they had different levels. They had between 8 to 10 cups. And so when I was in Germany going, okay, you can't, you're outlawing 2 pills. I was like, you're having, I would guess the equivalent of, I don't know, 30, 40 pills a night. And
Yeah.
so some people get a dry mouth appearance with white, especially if you're a dark person, they would get white, scaly skin. But that's a huge amount of kava.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice anything adverse, except basically people were gonna dance together, and then they would just literally all fall asleep in a cuddle puddle, the whole village.
Side
Then
effects.
they would go to their little bure by themselves, one at a time, and everyone would kind of fall asleep themselves. And I took like 3 kilos back to San Francisco, and I decided to have a party that was the opposite of like a get excited party. I had a kava party we had kava until literally everyone fell asleep. I played South Pacific songs, tried to lower the vibration instead of raise the vibration, which was very interesting. And yeah, that's it. There were really no bad side effects. A lot of kava.
I guess not even, like, side effects, but just, like, with dosage being, like, what is the psychological effects of taking, because you think about, like, shrooms, or you think about, Yeah, right. Just like sleepiness in general, there's no like type of.
I was gonna say that feeling you had with your one aku is maintained.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, that's what I wanted to
The whole
know.
night, you would just be sleeping good the whole night.
You were just
wait, I'm sorry.
chill.
It creates vivid dreams.
Yes, it does.
So
Oh.
when I was pregnant,
Some
with my-
varieties more than others.
When I was pregnant with my son, what happens is, if I only have just 4 hours of sleep, it would put you into deep REM sleep faster. So if you sleep less, you are having healing dreams, because there's so many animals out there that need the REM sleep, and this really helps with rest, even with limited hours of sleep.
Nice.
Yeah, everybody I talk to, basically, doesn't matter how hard they worked, how little sleep they had, they always wake up refreshed if
Oh,
they
wow.
partook in
And I
ava.
think that's why
Wow.
you go deeper
really
into
cool.
vivid dreaming.
Is there a particular variety, name that you know that would help with dreaming, like just the dreaming, for example?
The one that keeps coming up would be the ava hiva.
Kiva.
Yes.
Thank you.
How do you spell that?
HIWA. And it's a dark variety. It's actually the preferred variety for ceremony and offering and whatnot. But that's the one that's been mentioned more than once. Others have been mentioned, once, maybe. But that's the one that's come up at least once.
Sweet. Thank you.
What are some good places that you would recommend, like if you were gonna get ava here, like Hawaiian grown ava, maybe from Puna, but maybe just like more locally where you acquire it, if you're trying to get some to have at home?
I acquire it from Kanakakava. They're the farm that I interned with. If you have social media, once in a while they'll announce ava drops here in Hilo. You can also pick up ava at their farm on the Hamakua coast, or else at their shop on Ali'i Drive. That's where I go for my ava other than the stuff I grow. I know there is like Maz or something in Honoka'a, but from what I understand, the fresh stuff that she sells to go is coming in from Molokai, so not quite as local. Yes.
If I wanted to regularly, or not regularly, but occasionally be able to consume ava at home, and I wanted to cultivate my own, how many plants or how large of a patch would I want to keep on my property for just my own personal and maybe share with some friends occasionally to have it frequently?
I would say however big you can, because it is such a long life to maturity, and I don't know how much you're gonna consume. You want to make sure that you always have something ready for you.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I wasn't sure.
Utilize that space.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if it was like if you had one good, healthy plant of good stock and it was mature and you could harvest roots from it to consume regularly. I just don't know the portioning of the roots to the actual amount of drink that you get from it. And does it kill the plant each time you harvest from it? Or
No.
Okay,
No.
so but like you just would want like several plants in a patch?
Yeah, I would say at least have some. So if something does start happening funky with that one guy, you can kind of let him recover and rest. And you have other guys, and then, like I said, I don't know how much you'll be consuming, so you don't want to take more than like a quarter of the plant max. So if you're consuming a lot, you might want to have another plant so that you can let that one regenerate while
Okay.
Generally, I mix 1 pound of root per gallon.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If that helps any.
How many pounds of roots would you get from like one big, healthy, mature plant?
Whew. I think we've pulled like 55-pounder ones.
Wow.
Okay.
Oh my God.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean that's the exception,
Sure,
right?
sure. But
hey,
many
if
pounds.
you're loving it and you've only got a few to take care of, it's not impossible.
Okay, all right. That's the info I was looking for. I just didn't know if it was like one.
More
plant.
likely, they're like 15,
Okay.
12 or 15.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still 12 or 15 gallons.
Yeah, it wasn't if it was like one plant per like cup or two of ava or no. Okay, it's many pounds of root.
But if you're taking only a quarter of that, then you know
Right. Got it.
it's a quarter of that.
Cool.
But
You could try like successive planting. You know, you plant every year, and then that way when you're harvesting, you always have something else like at different stages.
yeah,
of growth.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, I was told for the stalk to be thumb width. And once I've got 3 or 4 of those on a plant, I take one. And that has, 8 or 9 nodes that I can then propagate. And so I don't really have like a time schedule. It's up to the plant. But I've always got babies.
That's the idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Without.
And they're not all going to make it either. So you don't want to be like, I'm planting at this time. And then, oh man, now I got to plant again. Because only half of them are good.
No, that's a good gardener right there, not forcing things, not
Yeah.
putting it in a box.
When you freeze the pulp, is it a different process, or is it about the same, and is it as potent or fresh when making lava?
I believe it maintains its potency. I don't have any like tests that I've run other than my own personal experience. It does become a little less green tasting, if that makes sense. But it's the same process. You have the pulp. We put 1 pound per 1 sandwich bag and make it nice and flat, so good storage. But then I know that one bag is also going to make 1 gallon. And then you just want to defrost it before you mix it. A little secret, halfway through mixing, I pour it in a blender, and then I stick it back through my strainer and squeeze again, just to kind of like chop it up a little bit more, activate. I don't know, I haven't really noticed any difference, but heat, some say heat will increase the cavalactone intensity and stuff, so play with it.
Oh, that's the chemical compound in it that makes you have the effect.
Yes.
Oh, okay. What is it called one more time?
Cavalactone, like
Cavalactone.
kava, lactone.
Okay.
Yes.
And then for planting, kind of borrowing from Larry here, but since it is root-based, how far apart do you kind of want each plant so it can have like enough expanse to grow and not maybe like compete too heavily with other ava plants around it or other companion plants?
Ideally, like I'd say 4 to 6 feet. I'm just estimating on what I saw at the farm between their plants, and then they were a good 10 feet from the canopy trees.
So you mentioned it was also used for fishing. Is that
For ceremony, yeah, offering. Oh no, it wasn't ava. Yeah, for ceremony and offering.
I was just thinking maybe that's to do with dreaming up celestial navigation codes.
Well, I mean, they don't mention that specifically, but dreams were welcomed and utilized heavily in traditional times. So, yeah, why not induce those dreams and make a call to the akua for it to be one for fishing and not your lover or something,
Do you know if it will grow under a false shade if you don't have a tree canopy?
So we do use shade cloths, and or like one guy, he'll put like just a coconut palm. When I said like out planting, and he'll just put a coconut palm over them for like the first year, and then take it away. But yeah, artificial shade works. Natural shade stays damp though, so you'll want to make sure you're checking that it's moist. Did I see a hand? Yes.
Do you have a favorite variety out of kind of like your experimentation with, I'm guessing probably most or all of like the 13 varieties, if you have one that kind of like speaks most to you?
It would be the Hiva because of its association with the sacredness and the ceremonies and all of that. So that's, neutral. But also because that's the guy, the one that I mentioned that I first got and put in the ground in my yard. Yeah, I'm biased towards the Awahiba.
If I wanted to buy like a gallon of kava, like of kava hiva, right? Like where would how do I go about sourcing certain types and not in powder form and not in, any of that? Like where do you source like already ready-made kava?
From Kanaka Kava in
From
Kailua
Kanaka.
Kona.
Okay.
It's hit or miss on the varieties with them. Like they'll harvest what they need. And sometimes they'll have enough of one variety to keep it separate, and they'll know what variety it is and everything, but it won't guarantee, like they won't guarantee have hiva all the time. They like the hiva too, so they do have it a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, if they don't have enough of one variety, then they make what they call a Hamakua Express, and they just kind of like blend them all together.
The Hamakua Express.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's where I go. They do have fresh gallons to go. You can bring your own container, or they do sell.
Nice. And you just make your own at home with your own plants? Or
Yeah,
with the farm that
sometimes
you're
I hit up
associated
the
with?
farm and tell them I want pulp and not not mix, and they're kind enough to do that for me. Yeah.
Awesome.
I have a real basic question. I've never really fully understood what the difference between kava and ava is.
As far as like species and genus goes, there's none. But mindset, kava are all the other guys. Ava is the 13 Hawaiian varieties.
Ah, okay. Noted.
Noted, indeed. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm curious, like in your interviews with community, and maybe you went over it and I might have just missed it, but what's the most common way, I guess, for people to engage with it? Like, were most people kind of like, enjoying it in more of like a social environment, or were they like preparing it at home medicinally, or were they like taking part in ceremony?
So one of them, she'd only had it once in like her Hawaiian studies class in elementary school. The other was at the Ava bars in Hilo. The two male cultivators were socially, but more like in solitude, self-medicating. And then Leia is ceremonial. Yeah, through her hula practice.
I just want to say that the name of it in the other parts of the Pacific is called kava kava, not just kava. And I don't know if that doubling of the name means it's double strong, but that's how we do linguistically people use the
Yeah,
name,
yeah,
right?
like bye.
Right. So any thoughts about kava versus kava versus ava? I'm just curious.
I don't know. The only thing that popped to my head is they do call, I believe it's the Samoan variety, the 2-day kava. And so when you said kava kava, I was like, oh, that's where the 2 comes from. I mean, it's said that you have a hangover for 2 days after drinking it, but that, I'm just sharing. That's the thought I came to. There's no facts behind that. Okay.
Maybe it's strong.
But yeah, but that like 2-day, giving you a 2-day hangover, kava kava, like I'm making connections myself, making them up.
I just want to say that because if you go to other islands, you say kava, they won't actually know what you're talking about. They just call it kava kava.
Oh, wow.
Kava.
Because the guy that helped me take the cuttings and took me out to show me how to like take cuttings and propagate, he comes from a family of generations, and himself is a kava farmer, and that's what he calls
I'd
it.
say maybe the plant is kava, or maybe the dried stuff.
Oh,
the ceremony
okay.
is kava. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't. I mean, I've heard kava kava, but I don't know what the distinction is.
short question. You said people wake up refreshed after drinking kava, and then you say people have a 2-day hangover.
They wake up refreshed after drinking ava. They have a 2-day hangover from kava.
Okay. Thanks for the
And not all of
clarification.
them, just that. I just heard about that one variety
Okay.
known as the 2-day kava because of the 2-day hangover. So I don't have any personal experience. I don't know if there's any truth behind that. I have to put those out there. I don't want to be attacked.
You're safe here.
Yeah, but I gotta go out there.
You're on Instagram Live too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so
Check the comments.
that's what's even better. I can't read that far. I'm old.
No, it's all good.
Oh, which reminds me, Ava, you mentioned how it like causes the scales and stuff, so it's known to cause dehydration, which causes those scales.
Wow.
Which is actually something they use for skin treatment to have new skin. So when you stop drinking the ava, those go away, and you're supposed to have like baby skin, like baby new skin. I don't know, I've never drank that much or taken that long of a break, so I couldn't say, but it's in the books.
Yeah. How regularly do you, if you're willing to share, how regularly do you consume ava?
If I could, it would be daily. Unfortunately, it's more like 3 or 4 days in a row every 2 or 3 weeks.
And I've been told by I had a friend on Oahu that would claim that having ava, once or twice, has a particular effect, but there is a buildup of the kava, of the what's it called?
Cavalactone?
The cavalactone. Yeah, he said that there would be a buildup, and the effect would change after like a week of consuming it regularly. Is there any truth to that?
So there is reverse tolerance with ava, so you definitely become rooted with less the more you consume. But as far as like the cavalactones building up, I'm not
I might
100%.
be misremembering exactly what he said the process was by which that was happening, but I do remember him saying that after consuming it for a few days in a row, the effect either comes more easily or the effect is a little bit more potent.
Yeah, so that's probably that reverse tolerance,
Okay. Yeah,
which
that-
would make sense if, the cavalactone building up makes sense, right? And then you haven't had time to flush it out, so it only takes this much versus that much to get you where you were, kind of thing, but I don't know 100%.
No, that answers my question.
Okay.
That's great. And are there like cavalactones found in any other plants?
Not that I know of, but I haven't really extensively researched other plants.
Sure.
I just want to say one other use. So if you have a newborn, you're sleeping better as a mom. If you're breastfeeding on demand, you can only sleep 3 hours at a time. Go back to sleep, and your child apparently doesn't cry. Like I breastfed for 3 years, my son never cried. So he obviously was getting some kava through my breast milk, and he was very calm.
The Ava Nene variety here in Hawaii is known to, it's not only the purest, so they've done those acidic toxicity tests on all of these varieties. The Ava Nene is the purest, but it was, our kupuna would give it to Chatter and Kiki, which is why it's Nene, and they make to settle them down and make them go to sleep. So yeah, it's definitely used to calm children as well, and our kupuna knew to give them that variety versus the more toxic.
Can you say more about that interaction between ava drinking and alcohol? You mentioned that several people said they were cured of alcoholism by it, but which would sound like they were probably trying to drink or needing to drink ava sort of daily, I would think. And then what happens if you're drinking ava and drink alcohol, then there's a toxic liver? Like how close together does consumption have to be toxic to the liver in that case? Or?
I honestly don't know. She's
Hi. So
hi. My name is.
it was actually a different kind of thing than what you think. They wouldn't give the kava to anyone who showed up having had alcohol. So they were excluded.
In that moment.
They were excluded from the group. So you had to choose as an individual, am I going to drink a beer or am I going to have kava with the group? The toxicity for your liver is quite high because it's dehydrating. And so if you have a dehydrating kava plant and dehydrated alcohol together, it's really not great. So it's hard on your liver.
But alcohol leaves your system within 24 hours.
That's what I'm not talking about drinking alcohol and kava together. I'm wondering if someone who wants to wean themselves off of alcohol, if they start drinking kava, if they drink kava Monday and Tuesday, but then drink alcohol Thursday, Friday, is that a problem?
I'd say if you're drinking water Wednesdays, you know what I mean. Just then your liver would probably have enough time to saturate itself with water and then be able to deal with the kava.
Right, and if you're not drinking kava, the kava lactones aren't staying long term in your body in terms of, like, it goes away, the effects leave you.
It goes away.
Do you know how long it stays in your system?
I don't know
That'd
how
be
long it
curious.
stays in your system, but like if you have one aku and you start feeling the numbing effect and you don't have another, it's gone within like 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, the kava lactones are still in there, but I'm also thinking the extreme amount of urination is probably helping to flush them out as well. But I don't have an answer for
I can smoke Bakalolo today and 30 days from now it can still be it's still in my system, and if it's in my system then it is, you know, it's still in me.
I would imagine your body treats it very similar to coffee or alcohol.
Anything that's processed through the liver, sounds like,
you're just immediately probably trying to flush it out, and it takes water to flush it out. And that's where the toxicity would come into play when you don't have enough water to flush out whatever.
that Ava book online. I don't know if it answers your question specifically, but it does have a couple of like scientific articles in there that talk about all of that chemistry stuff and everything. It just wasn't necessarily the focus of my study.
Got it.
So.
That's a good research.
You weren't prepared for biochemistry and
Anthropology is a soft science, guys.
Like calculus 2.
We're social.
I'm not ready for this. I stopped at 3.
You are an amazing presenter, though, because you really you talked about how to grow it, how to prepare it, your personal use of it, cultural association, you have language, so it's one of the best presentations I've ever been to that really kind of covers, it's very well-rounded, so thank you for that.
Thank you. I apologize for reading off of my slides.
Oh, no.
You did phenomenal.
Reading is good.
Mahalo nui.
Yeah, mahalo.
Is that it then, guys?
Thank you.
Yay! Thank you guys all for listening and being so attentive and engaged. I love talking Ava. It's cute.
Yay.